Make your marks.
You're listening to the Pullbuoy podcast.
Well, that was quite a week of swimming we've just seen in Sheffield at the British Championships 2023. Steve here, welcoming you back to the Pullbuoy podcast. I've got Bob and Casey with me, and over the course of this episode, we're going to cast our eye over events in the water and indeed out of the water, because there were some talking points that occurred not in the racing, but we'll come to that in a minute. I wrote beforehand, Bob, that we could expect thrills, spills, drama and disappointment, and I think the championships delivered all of those.
It certainly did, Steve. There were lots of very good swims from what I would call second-tier swimmers, which impressed me greatly. A lot of names emerged last week who I didn't know a great deal about, who I think are maybe not quite going to be ready for Paris, but as we look towards next commies, so it looks towards LA. I think our next tranche of impressive swimmers in events where we're not actually that strong at the moment as well is quite impressive. So, kind of looking beyond the next 12 months and the Paris section, looking beyond that next commies, the Worlds beyond that, and also the Olympics for 2028. I think there's a lot of promise being shown last week in event with swimmers we hadn't seen before.
Very true. And Katie, we've been watching fast swimming around the world, various meets. Particularly, we saw Canadian trials a week or so before our meet here. It's good to see our guys getting back in and doing some really impressive swimming.
Yeah, I think we saw impressive swims from some people that we would have expected it from, and then others, really taking some chances. I think if you'd told me the list of people who would get the qualifying times, at the end of the meet, I would have been quite surprised at some of those names. They're not ones that I would have listed at going ahead of the meet. So some people really, really stepping up, and maybe a few falling short or shorter than we would have expected as well.
Well, there's plenty to talk about that did happen, as I said, in the racing itself. But probably one of the big talking points, and it was the elephant in the room before the championship started, was the selection policy, because the times were incredibly fast. And we got halfway through the meet and hardly anyone had made the consideration times, let alone the qualifying times, and the selectors invoked their ability to change the policy and remove the limit on their wildcards so they could pick more. Now, I can't remember, Katie, that ever having happened before. I mean, have you ever seen anything like that happen?
No, I think the policies have always allowed enough flexibility that you can pretty much guarantee the team will be able to look like they want it to look at the end of a meet. But this selection policy, I suppose, the times were just so stiff that we were going to end up with no one at all on the team. And I think the biggest problem was that we wouldn't have enough people to have relays, which would mean that we couldn't enter relays in the Olympics next year, or we'd have to go to the World Championships next year, which I think an awful lot of people don't see as optimum preparation for the Olympics. I haven't seen them backtrack like that. I don't really get I get the point of fast qualification times, because I know they don't want to take tourists on teams. They want to take people who are in with a chance of finaling and getting on the podium. But you need to bring some people through, and you need to give people hope of being on a team without dropping kind of 10 seconds from their best time. And B, it's not like people aren't trying. If you're going to set a qualification time that's faster than a British record, people aren't not breaking British records because they can't be bothered. They're probably because they're incredibly fast times. We're a pretty decent swimming nation, so I don't really see the point in setting almost impossibly fast times. That said, some people stepped up and got times, dropping massive amount from their entry times, but not very many, as you say.
I think it's puzzled a lot of other countries as well, just looking at the feedback I've seen from other countries and their swim websites. Certain words like ridiculous, or not impossible, those kind of words being used. And I'm, again, slightly perplexed as to why we're doing it in a World Championship year. If you're doing it in an Olympics year, I can almost understand it. I can get why the criteria should be a bit stricter. But the World Champs year, especially when you've got two World Champs in the space of 8 months, as you're going to have this time round, don't quite get it.
No, it does it is very odd. I mean, as Katie said, I kind of understand the logic for the fast qualifying times. Know that if you get them, you know you're going to get people who are capable of making a final or whatever. But I couldn't see why the consideration times were so fast, because it just meant that they carved huge swathes of eligible people out of the people that they could select from, and hence why they've had to expand the wild card so they can get enough people in to have relays. But nobody wants to be going to Doha. No, if they don't have to, I would think. And certainly lots of GB's people have said they don't want to go. So, and
imagine America won't be there either. So most of the major nations won't send many people. So you're right. This is the World Champs. It's going to matter for the Olympics. But I still think that, we have our own qualifying standards, and next year will be the year to up the pace a bit more. I think this year was not the year to do that.
No, it does feel like they just cranked the handle a little bit too far this time. But there we are. They've done what they've done. The times were what they were. They can now pick basically as many swimmers as they want, in a discretionary basis up to the team limit of 30. And we'll see in due course who gets the nod. But let's talk about the actual swimming, because obviously that's the bit that was exciting. That's much better than backroom politics or whatever else was going on in Sheffield. And we'll start with the men. And freestyle, sprint freestyle, Bob. Now, you and I, and Katie will remember as well, that for years we just couldn't find a sprint freestyler. Coming out of our ears now, what an impressive set of results.
Well, if we could, Steve, it was only ever one, wasn't it? So we produced them in ones. It wasn't like our breaststrokers that came along on a production line. Our 100 freestylers generally would come along one at a time. You get an Adam Brown, you get Simon Burnett, you get, these people will come through in every 4-year cycle to be replaced by one other person, who then be replaced by another person. The fact that we have the depth that we have, and that's without young Jacob Whittle doing the business last week. You look at the depth we now have at 100, 200, not 400 yet, but certainly 100 and 200, most definitely. And we'll move on to the 200, I'm sure, in due course, but the 200 is unbelievably good. And the 100 is getting there as well now. Just a shame that Jacob wasn't quite on form last week.
But even without that, Katie, the top four were dropping some really impressive times. I mean, he didn't manage it quite in the final, but Matt Richards 47.72 in the heats of the 100 free. I mean, I saw that result and did a massive double take. I mean, that's a heat swim and a half.
Yeah, for me, I think he was basically the swimmer of the meet. He's obviously had a good year so far, but I wasn't expecting, across all three freestyle distances, the sort of performances that he came out with. He was so impressive, and is that one extra leg I think that we need to feel like that's the sort of team to be beaten, really.
Yeah, I mean, the depth that group now has is remarkable. I mean, we've got the 4 fastest swimmers that Britain's ever had in that event swimming now. They've all swum 47 point from a flat start. Relays are funny. You've got to get everyone swimming their best at the same time on a given day. But if Britain can do that, then they're in the shout, Bob, of winning, aren't they? Not getting medal. They're in the conversation for winning that event.
4x1, yeah, exactly. And who would have thought that even 4 years ago? There have been times when we haven't been able to put a quartet together. Very often we haven't, at the World Championship level and at Olympic level. There are so many people knocking on the door now. Lewis Barros is a great example of somebody who we weren't talking about 2 years ago has now come into the frame. And what's been so impressive, you talk about Matt Richards, is what he did at 50, 100 and 200, becoming the first swimmer in the world, not just in this country, first swimmer in the world to do those big sub swims in all 3 events. So, I wasn't sure when he made that move from Bath. I've got to be honest, I did question that a little bit, but proof of the pudding was what he managed to do in the pool last week.
Yeah, and he'd taken himself out of the performance centre environment. Was obviously worked very well for him in doing that, because he did a very good 200 and as well. I mean, he was first, as you say, first guy to swim sub 22, sub 48, sub 145 in those 3 events, which is remarkable. But the way he swam his 200, Katie, was really impressive as well, because Tom Dean went for it. Matt was, I don't know, metre and a half down with 150 metres, but he produced a phenomenal last turn, rather like he did at the Olympics in that relay, and had it all left in the tank to get him home for the win. So really, really impressive.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you're up against some big guys, Olympic gold and silver medalists, and it's the event that everyone wants. So it would have been, one of those races that was very easy to bottle or get wrong, and he just held his nerve completely. And as you say, that last turn was incredible, and he just absolutely powered home. And at the end of a long week and a big week of racing for him, it was such an impressive swim.
And the big question now for you two is, where do you put him in the quartet? Do you stick with him where he was in the Olympics, is where I think he's most effective, or would you say, well, you put your fastest swimmer on the anchor leg?
I am just laughing back to myself thinking about the Claire Balding interview with him, which I don't know if you both remember. I think I'd probably leave him where he was, because I think it's almost more about where everyone else is in that relay, because I think we've just got, I think that so far has been such a sort of perfectly put together team, which is sort of maximizes everyone's strengths. So I'd probably leave that just as it was. But we've got a whole year to go, right? And
is that a selection dilemma, though? Is that a dilemma now?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, we've got time. We've kind of got time to play with it, haven't we? And this is the year maybe to get it wrong, and leading up to next year. And I don't mean we don't want a world gold, of course we do, but I think most people would agree that Olympic gold is worth more, and if we experiment, then this is the year to do it and not next year. Because it looks like, at the moment, I know someone always comes through an Olympic year, but at the moment it looks like those are the 4 guys who are going to be on that team next year, and those are probably the 4 guys that, unless someone comes through and does something huge, those are the 4 guys you kind of want in your team for next year. And I can see those 4 guys standing on top of the podium. So it's a pretty good place to be. And I'm not sure that after last year I really expected to feel this way about that team. But yeah, I feel pretty good about it. Quite excited about it.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I've thought about this question, Bob, before. I think I swing backwards and forwards about wanting to hide, Tom Dean in the middle of a relay where people aren't expecting him, and just try and blow the race open. Maybe with him swimming second or something. But you could just swim the same order as the Olympics. I think that would work just as well. So
good luck hiding Tom Dean anywhere.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I just remember seeing Sweden hide. I used to hide as a word. Sweden's women hiding Sarah Sjöström in the middle of their relay team. And when she used to swim 200 meters freestyle, and it just completely blows the race apart, because you take masses out of other people's teams, by having that really fast leg in the middle, and Britain have got enough fast legs that you can do that.
We got 3 144s,
exactly.
So you can't really do that, can you?
And I got into trouble with James Guy on Twitter yesterday because I pointed out someone else who was making up teams that he'd swum a 143 before, and I said I wasn't sure he'd do that again, and he came at me and said, "No, don't make me prove you wrong." But we've got the 3 guys who
please do.
Yeah, that's what I said. But we've got 3 guys who split 143. So in the past, so it's just bonkers to think, what could happen in that one. Anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. They've still got to, get to Fukuoka and Paris and do the business, but certainly in a very good place. And also with Joe Litchfield, I think he did a PB 146, Jack McMillan 146. So you even think like you've got a bit that depth to be able to, have that bit of extra for the heats as well. So looking very promising for that group in those 2 relays. Someone I thought got a bit overlooked because of the quality of those 2 events was Dan Jervis. He swam a really, really good 1500, Bob, 1446, 1446.95, just off his personal best. One of the 5 qualification times that were made. A really good swim from him. He had a bit of a tough time last year. Obviously missed Commonwealths with illness. Yep. Is this the year that he can get that British record off David Davies?
I think it's going. Hopefully it's going to go in Fukuoka. I think mentally and now physically, Dan's where he wants to be, swam that race exactly the way he wanted to, was injecting a bit of pace, which you don't often see with Dan. Sometimes he can be a bit even paced along the way and go, come on, just put something extra in. He was able to do that to a certain extent in Sheffield. And I think that I've been waiting for him to have that real breakout swim. He makes finals. He's always there or thereabouts. And we know how tough that event is. The Italians are very strong. It's got a lot of depth in the world. But if he can get down into those 1442, 43 range, which he is capable of on the back of what we saw there, even a 1440, if he could do that, he'll be mixing it with the top Italians, and who knows, that medal international level has to come at some point.
Yeah, I think a medal might be a stretch, given the four guys. But
yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, because you're right, it's not Olympic year; it's a World Championship year. Some people have a slight drop off at the year before the Olympics, and I just think that because he's in a very good place in pretty much everything in his life right now, that I think the British record will go. Just how close do you get to a 1440?
Well, we'll see, won't we? I mean, yeah. I think it's one step at a time. I think the record must be him. He must have a shout at that. So let's hope he gets that, and then the result will take care of itself, won't it? If he can put the time down. But really good from him. Really good from him, I thought. A name, Katie, that we hadn't really considered, hadn't really heard a lot about, was Oliver Morgan from University of Birmingham, who came along, maybe not completely out of nowhere because he swam well in Edinburgh, but perhaps we weren't expecting him to take all 3 backstroke titles this week. So a new name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely. I think I was pretty excited by his 50, but sort of didn't know what to expect in any of the other distances. And then, the 100, we suddenly saw that 53 that we've been looking for. And I know Luke Greenbank's been 53, but it's sort of, that's not his preferred backstroke distance. And I think I often feel that we're sort of expecting quite a lot of him to sort of become a 100 backstroker when it comes to that medley relay. So it's really, really great to finally see someone else coming through on that. And I'm not sure that it's the person that I expected it to be. I think we'd seen a number of other names sort of coming through. Maybe is it Jonathan Adam? Sort of had a pretty good year last year, but yeah, a really, really great. And then that 200, I was just, I think certainly Luke had an off week perhaps, but to see him step up and take that 200 as well was absolutely brilliant. He must have been having the week of his life, I think, but hopefully more to come.
And it feels to me like he's a relatively late bloomer. I mean, I think one of his interviews he said he'd only really started training properly, inverted commas, 18 months ago when he went to Birmingham. So you kind of feel he's got a lot of upside because he's coming at it new and fresh. So hopefully he took a second off his PB in the backstroke heats, 100 heats. So hopefully he can find keep that momentum going through the rest of the year. And into next year, because we could really do with a 52.100 backstroker for that relay. We haven't had one since Chris Walker-Hebben retired 2017, I want to say, something like that. So maybe 2018. But yeah, would be terrific to get that, and some hopefully that group they'll continue to push each other along. We see that with the groups that we get, don't we? Where it raises the general standard, but you've got 3 or 4 guys all chasing that. Then hopefully that will spur them all on.
Is he going to be training out of Sandwell when that's fully opened?
Haven't Birmingham got the 50-metre pool already? I don't know. I don't profess to be an expert on Birmingham's pools.
I think as well, it's an interesting point you make about a group. I think one of the things I noticed about this week was that we need to keep an eye on things that aren't just performance centres. There were some really great swims coming from lots of different places this week, and I think it was a bit more spread out than it has been. We've pretty much seen teams being formed of Loughborough, Bath and Stirling, obviously a few others, but I think hopefully when this team is announced, depending how wide they're throwing the net when they go for their discretionary picks, I think we'll see a bit more variety. And it is worth remembering that although obviously a lot of the resources are concentrated into the performance centres, there are a lot of other people doing really great work, and you can achieve things by without being a performance centre and without having all that. There are other ways to do it, and it's sort of quite nice to see that.
Definitely, I agree. Now, I fact-checked myself while you were speaking, Katie, and University of Birmingham does have its own 50-metre pool, so I don't think he'll be going to Sandwell, Bob. But
right, okay.
I think he's in a good place. They seem to have a really good atmosphere in that squad from what I hear, and fingers crossed he can keep pushing on. While we're on the subject of the medley relay, though, obviously, Oliver put himself firmly in the frame for that. If the selectors elect to take that, obviously it didn't make their consideration time, but it's almost unthinkable that they won't take that squad. So he's in pole position for the backstroke. We obviously have a plethora of 100 freestylers to choose from for the end, but the other two legs maybe a little bit more up in the air. But we saw a bit of a shock, Bob, in the 100 butterfly, where Jacob Peters took a big step forward. He beat James Guy 51.16, personal best to win. It's been coming for a little while, but because
that's why I don't think it's a big shock. Actually, I think that I've always rated Jacob. I've not always been on the same page as other people on that. There's some people thought that Jacob might be a bit flaky, might be a bit of a flash in the pan, might be somebody who could turn it on now and again, but wouldn't be consistent. But just having a look at what he was doing with Dave McNulty down in Bath when I was down there last year, and talking to Dave about him, I just got the feeling that he turned a corner if there was a corner to be turned, that he really had his head down, knew what he wanted to do. Dave was working very closely with him, and I actually, when I saw that, it didn't surprise me greatly, because obviously he's training with James as well, so he sees what he does on a daily basis, and I think that's a good spur for him to do exactly what he did last week.
And really helpful in terms of having options for heats. And
what about
like
his
that.
50 as well?
Yeah.
What about his 50? I didn't expect that, to be honest. The 100 I did, the 50 I didn't.
Yeah, what he did.
Yeah, I was really surprised by the 50. I mean, I think mostly when you see someone beating Ben Proud off a start, you sit up and take notice. I know Ben Proud was looking like he probably wasn't, all in for this, but I thought his 50 was incredible.
Yeah, really good. And they say plenty of options then for the heats as well. You're not reliant on swimming James in everything. So they were trying that out last year, weren't they, with Jacob and with Ed Mildred. So really great to have that option. But that leaves the breaststroke. Now, wasn't the best 100 breaststroke we've seen at British Championships. Obviously, we'll talk about Adam in a minute not being there, but it just was a bit flat, wasn't it, Katie?
Yeah, I think part of it is that we're used to, fireworks, mainly from Adam, but it was just a bit meh, to be honest. It felt, and James Wilby is a brilliant breaststroker, but that version of James Wilby wasn't at trials, I don't think, this week. It didn't really look like an event that we're great at, and it is an event that we're great at, so that's sort of quite a hard watch in that way. And don't get me wrong, it's not up to James Wilby to suddenly be Adam Peaty, but it felt like we suddenly weren't particularly deep in the breaststroke at all, having felt like it's a real strength.
Yeah, he was a lot better in his 200, albeit the qualifying, the consideration time, qualifying times were very tough once again, so he didn't quite make that. But he was, looked a bit more like his old self in the 200. But it does leave a question mark, Bob, doesn't it, about the medley relay without Adam? Now, we don't know exactly what his situation is with regard to Worlds. His statement on Instagram was very much around not swimming British Championships, but he was continuing to train. So we don't know if British Swimming will pick up the phone to him and ask him to come, rather like Canada did with Taylor Ruck and Penny Alexiak. But it does kind of hinge on James getting back to his best, doesn't it, without Adam?
Yes, it does. But I hope that Adam will. To be absolutely honest, had the Commonwealth Games not been in Birmingham last summer, I don't think we would have seen him at all, because I don't think he would have done those events. But because it was a home crowd and he didn't want to let a home crowd down, he came back and did the 150, where he probably wasn't anywhere near the kind of level he wants to be. It's difficult to analyse, because a lot of things are obviously happening in the pool and outside the pool, mainly outside the pool as far as he's concerned right now. He has got another 3 months to get himself. I hope that they'll put him on the team and let him decide whether he wants to go or not, because I think he should be an automatic pick anyway. So put him on the team, see what he feels like a month out. Say, obviously you'll have an alternate, which would be James, but give Adam the chance to go there, because, a big meet, he never lets us down.
Well, we will wait and see how the selection plays out in that particular regard. But one final event I wanted to sort of highlight, which I think we can be fairly clear on who is going to go to Fukuoka, is the men's 200 IM, where we saw Tom Dean and Duncan Scott going hammer and tongs at each other. Tom Dean got the touch this time with a personal best. He's really improved. For me, it's his backstroke, Katie, that made the difference compared to, say, the Commonwealth final last year, where Duncan had too much for him.
Yeah, I mean, he just keeps surprising us, doesn't he? I mean, I think surprising us. He's just so good. I know we've talked about it before, but his breaststroke is ridiculously good for a 200 freestyler, if we're allowed to call him that, or a 100 freestyler, or a 400 IM, or a 200 breaststroker, or whatever he might be on a given day. But I sort of don't know what version of Duncan we're seeing at the moment. I know he had some illness last year, which I think took a lot out of him. But I think I would have thought that Duncan would come out on top on that one. So and it wasn't a poor swim by him; it was just a great swim by Tom. So there's just another string to his bow, isn't it? And we knew it was there, but I don't think I knew he was that good at it.
Yeah. Duncan's been on record saying he's done a lot more volume than he used to do in this cycle leading up to these championships, and so maybe his taper has worked slightly differently from normal. Because he was almost right on his 100 PB, but then he was a little bit off on the 200. So maybe that could be it. But it's good to see him. So as you say, after the illness he had last year, looking more like his normal self, even if not quite his normal self. So we'll hope he'll go to Worlds and be the Duncan Scott we know and love, and he can throw down some great times. Let's move on and talk about the women's events. It was a good week to be called Freya, Bob. So let's start with Freya Anderson, who put down what was a really impressive 200 meters freestyle. She cracked 1:56 for the first time, personal best time, one of the top times in the world. Really great to see her kind of happy and swimming well.
Yeah, on both counts, definitely. And again, another person has got plenty more in the tank if she carries on in that kind of form. She's looking fantastic. She's all the things that we thought that she would turn into. Perhaps she's not done the times last couple of years that we thought that she could. Maybe that's the breakthrough swim. And everything kind of was pretty much aligned last week, and I think that we'll see her do some really impressive stuff at the Worlds this year, and hopefully for Paris next year.
Yeah, she swam 1:56.0 at Worlds last year, Casey's. So it's really great for her to come back and kind of move that on again, rather than falling backwards, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and I think that was Worlds. That was the big meet, and I think. For some of these top guys, I think British champs can be quite hard to get to show the best of yourself, because although the very top can often be quite tight and very, very high level, it can drop off quite quickly, which is obviously not the case when you're getting to to Worlds and Olympics. But she just seemed so delighted with that, and I saw a really great post from her on Instagram after that race talking about how you can keep doing PBs, and even if you've had a bit of a flat time and you haven't improved for quite a long time, there's still the chance to do it. I think I was almost more impressed with her 100, not more impressed, but I wasn't expecting the 100 because I thought her stroke just looked so perfectly suited for the 200, quite not a particularly fast tempo, and I didn't think it would be suited to the 100, and then she came out and did a brilliant 100 as well. So yeah, she just looked really great, and as you say, really, really happy, which I think is for her particularly is quite a big key to swimming fast.
Well, indeed, she came back 53.48 in the 100, just touched out Anna Hopkin, who was looking pretty good as well, 24.5 over 50, Katie. That's moving in the right direction for this season for her.
Yeah, I think she said that it was the fastest she'd ever been at this time of the season. So she seemed really, really positive about that. I think, obviously they've had a bit of disruption probably in all of their preparation with various people in their squad at sort of different points in their preparation, and Adam not being there, and I'm sure he's a big part of that squad. So she was great, and I think there are some really tough qualifying times again in the women's sprint freestyle. I don't know whether or not she thought she was going to get down to those qualifying times, but certainly within the consideration times for both, which is great, and I'm sure we'll see her on the team.
Definitely. I think almost certain to see her going to Fukuoka. Now, the other Freya I'm referring to is, of course, Freya Colbert. She had some terrific battles with Katie Shanahan in many of her events this week. The 400 IM particularly impressive. Both her and Katie carved chunks off their lifetime bests in that race. Freya with a 4:35.5. It's we talked about having swimmers pushing each other on, Bob. It's great to have those two, clearly good friends as well, been on camps together and all sorts, but they're pushing each other so hard in lots of different events, and that can only be a good thing.
And we've said so many times, I think, in British terms, that event is not moving on. It hasn't moved on because the British record's 2009, I think, isn't it? From that, 4:33. It's been on the books for 14 years now. It needs to go. I know that was Rome and Hannah, I think, in the shiny suits. But I'm hoping that we can get some. We've just seen what Summer can do for Canada. Hopefully we can get both of those getting down towards 4:32, 4:31 before too long, because that's what I'd like to see, because that event's, apart from a certain Canadians, not moving on that much around the world.
Yeah, I think Hannah was 4:31, but it was 2009. In a poly number, full poly number. So yeah. But as you're saying, there's a long time since that that event had her and Amy Wilmot sort of going at it regularly, and they came up against each other again over 200 IM, Katie over 200 backstroke, where I think Freya took 5 seconds off her best time or something, and they both swam really, really well. So they're two very exciting swimmers to have in our stable.
Yeah, I think I underestimated them both because I've thought that they're both great swimmers, but I didn't think they were that good. I sort of needed to be shown. Those are serious 400 IM times. We just saw them last year. I think both of them break 4:40, and I was like, oh, okay, that's good getting down there. But down to like the 4:35 or 4:36 is brilliant. We saw Katie do a great 200 backstroke earlier in the year, and then she dropped even more time, down to a 2:07, which is a time that should make a final at Worlds. Having, I think last year she might have broken 2:10 for the first time, and that's a huge drop. And then for Katie also to go 2:09 in the 200 IM, which is serious time, and beat Abby Wood. I just completely underestimated her. She's so much better than I knew that she was, and I knew that she was pretty good. And I think the thing that's great about both of them is that we've seen, Katie in the ISL and Freya just coming through last year to do her first international events. They don't seem to get spooked by the big stage. They just seem to kind of get on with it, which is great. And they're just, you don't really worry about them going into a big event. They're just kind of on the team. They're going to do the job. It's great.
Yes, terrific from both of them. I think the 200 backstroke is the one I'm probably the most excited for Katie about. I think maybe not this year. There's a little bit more to drop, but I think she's got the British record in her for that one. That's another poly-suited one, I think. It's Gemma Spofford.
It's Gemma Spofford, isn't it? Yeah, it's
another one from 2009. Yeah, so I think that's within her capability. Maybe I say not this year, but probably next year. So really excited to see her progress in that event. But those two were terrific this week, and both of them meeting the qualification times as well. So we've spoken about how tough they were. They did terrifically well in Ponds Forge. The last qualification time that was set was another lady, and in the 200 butterfly, and Casey, we've spoken about Laura Stevens before and said she just needed to find some consistency. Maybe she's cracked it finally. She's from 207 in Edinburgh, 207 in the heats here, 206 in the final. Has she turned that corner now? She's with after a year with Dave Hemmings, to be able to produce the performances repeatedly.
I hope so. I really hope so, because I've seen her consistently go 210. I've seen her consistently go 207 in a heat and then maybe a little bit slower in a final. She wanted that 206 so badly. You could just see how chuffed she was and how relieved she was after she did it. And that that's a serious time. I hope that we're going to see her go a 206 at Worlds. I suppose something that was on my mind a little bit watching some of the really fast times this week were, okay, well, is it at Worlds you're going to have to go your 4:35 in the heat and faster in the final, whereas at the moment at trials people can kind of go 4:46 in a heat before dropping a 4:35 in a final, and Katie would have to do 3 200 backstrokes and she'd probably be all right on a 209. She might make a final if she goes a 208, and then she's going to have to drop the hammer, in the final. It's just a different step up, isn't it, when you get to Worlds and having to do these times consistently. There's a few of those that just crossed my mind when I was looking at the qualification times. Not so much with Dan Jones, because we've seen him do it before. We've seen him do the heats. We've seen him do the finals, which obviously he didn't have to do this week. It was just a straight final. But it's quite a different atmosphere when you get to those big meets. And it's just whether we can repeat those times.
Well, I think that's been a continuous issue for Britain, hasn't it, for many years. But I kind of get the impression, like you said, they're happy in the arena, aren't they, Freya and Katie? So I get the impression that they can manage that. We hope that Laura can manage it as well, because she's evidently found some speed, found, hopefully, as we say, that consistency. And if she can put it together, then who knows, what might happen. Certainly the final at Worlds would be possible. But coming home behind her in that 200 fly, Emily Large, Bob, who is someone else, perhaps not a conscious decision, but who moved away from Bath down to Millfield, same as Matt Richards has done. And he's been reborn, 207, 207 something, 207.33 for her in the 200 fly. It's kind of out of nowhere, really. We've not seen that from her for years.
Are they inspiring each other, I wonder? Now the swimming dream team up there in Millfield, those two might well be egging each other on. And I know it's a great partnership within that team and also outside the pool. So it's good to see her back. I remember obviously seeing her in the early days when she was up in the northeast, the meets I used to cover, looking like a really big prospect for the future. Has had, not the kind of results the last couple of years she would have wanted, but maybe that's, she's still young enough to push on, and maybe that's a catalyst for her to do just that.
Yeah, well, we love to see, people coming back to form, and especially when they can do really great times like that as well. So we'll hope that she can repeat the dose at Worlds later this year. We touched on Abby Wood briefly. In the context of the 200 AM and her battle with Katie, but she was good this week. I mean, PB in the 200 free, 157.2, a little bit off in the 100 free maybe, but her 200 AM was good as well. And she wobbled a bit last year, Katie. So it's really good to see her swimming, back at her best.
Yeah, I think she had a few issues with health last year as well. But I was quite surprised not to see her do the 200 breaststroke, because especially as her 200s was so great this week. She's obviously brilliant at 200 breaststroke, but has decided not to do it and focus on other events. But I sort of feel like it is an event where that there are chances. There aren't necessarily always the same people on the podium. It's normally quite close, and this is internationally. I'm talking not GB. Her and Molly Renshaw have been pretty consistently in finals, and I know now Molly's retired. I sort of thought that Abby would continue going with that event, but obviously her choice of events worked out really well for her this week. So it's really great to see her back. I'm sure she would have liked to have been the first to the wall in that 200 IM, but good to have a bit of domestic competition and spur her on that one.
Yeah, I wonder whether, she may yet get the opportunity to swim the 200 breaststroke if she wants to at Worlds. I mean, that's going to have a spot open, that event, I would think. But we'll see how she elects to shape her programme. I wanted to talk briefly about women's relays because we've talked about how tough the times were. They were equally tough for those women's relays. None of them made the grade. We'd like to think that they'll swim a medley relay at least. Medi Harris won the 100 backstroke. Cara Hanlon was pretty good. She has Scottish record over 50 breaststroke. She won the 100 breaststroke. Kiana McInnes broke 58 seconds for the first time. Scottish record on the 100 fly. None of them qualified individually, regardless of that. Obviously, we've spoken about Freya Anderson on the anchor already. You'd like to see them go to try and get the Olympic qualification, if nothing else, Bob.
Yeah, absolutely, because they should be Olympic finalists next year. So give them a chance to get there. It would seem really odd and wrong and remiss of the selection policy not to have a medley relay. When it comes to 4x1s and 4x2s, well, there's obviously questions about that, but the medley relay, yeah, definitely.
Katie, your view on the freestyle relays? I mean, does it just risk spreading Freya and Abby a bit thin?
Well, I don't I think we'd only need to take one extra person to fill up those relays, which I think would be Lucy Hope, who had a pretty good week again. I think she looked much better this week than she'd looked last year. And I sort of feel like we ought to give ourselves the chance to swim those relays at the Olympics next year. So we need to swim them at Worlds. I think the 4x2 actually looks quite a lot better than the 4x1. I think we're heavily reliant on Anna and Freya in the 4x1, whereas the 4x2, I know Freya Colbert didn't actually swim the 200 free this week, but we know that she's got a great 200 free in her, and we know that she'll be on the team. So that team can go faster anyway. I think that could be quite an exciting team. I don't think I think the podiums are pretty much locked up in both of those relays. So if we're chasing medals, those are probably not the events to be doing it in. But is that the only reason why we send a team to the Olympics to get a medal? I mean, I don't think it is. People might say that that's what you should be aiming for, but I think an Olympic final is pretty special. So and I think we should be Olympic finalists in all the relays, to be honest. I suppose it's just how team sizes work out. But we're competitive. They're just not as good as some of our other relays. Okay, well,
we'll see how the selectors play their cards in terms of the relays and the spares and the alternates, and whether they want to take 7 people for the men's 4x2 as we've seen in the past, or whatever, which they could realistically do. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they jump on those relays. I think that's time to draw things to a conclusion. Your overall impression of the week, Bob? How do you feel after watching that competition?
Yeah, pretty enthused and pretty encouraged, to be honest. I do want to throw one name in, though, that you've not mentioned so far. A future superstar at 14, Amelie Bloksic. We finally maybe have an 1,500 metres freestyle female swimmer who can take us forward after all this time. She's only 14, not putting any great pressure on her shoulders yet. But for LA, watch out.
Quite possibly one for the future. Katie, would you take her to Worlds? If one of your wild cards for the experience?
No, I wouldn't. Not because she's not great. I think she is great, but I think she's just dropping time like you wouldn't believe. But I think taking her to Worlds at 14 and at just 14,
commies, next
puts
commies,
a lot. Yeah, but if you took her to Worlds this year,
no.
I think that would put a hell of a lot of pressure on her.
Yeah, no.
And you don't know what's going to happen in the next year, but I don't think a 14-year-old needs to be built up in the year before the Olympics. And I say that hopefully in a supportive way of her rather than a dismissive way.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I think give her the opportunity at World Juniors or European Juniors or even European Under-23s if you want to gain experience, and then let her qualify in her own right, if you like, for the Olympics next year if that's her trajectory. But yeah, it'd be an interesting one. She was terrific, wasn't she? So very exciting, and I know a lot of people on the internet are very excited about her. So let's watch her with interest as things go on. Katie, your overriding impression of the week?
Too many finals. That I don't think we need 4 finals. I also think Priority Paris needs renaming. But
it will be after next year.
Look at LA. Or look for LA or something.
Yeah, something like that. No, I think I was pleasantly surprised by a lot of swims, and I think there are a few events that I felt a little bit disappointed in, but overall positive, and it's great to end on that men's 200 free. That leaves me definitely feeling positive.
Yeah, definitely. I think I feel positive about the week overall. I think the selection times made it feel worse than it was, but when you actually take a step back and look at some of the results, I thought, yeah, on the balance, I thought it was a good week. So I'm excited to see what happens at World Championships later this year. Great talking to you both. We'll call it a day there. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
If you want to get in touch about anything we've said on this podcast, you can find me on Twitter at Pullbuoy or at Pullbuoy UK on Instagram, or you can go to pullbuoy.co.uk/contact. But until we're back with you with the next episode, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Pullbuoy podcast. For more episodes, visit www.pullbuoy.co.uk/podcast.